Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Garland. I appreciate that. Historically, Illinois has housed many people with disabilities in segregated settings. However, over the last several years, thousands of people with disabilities have moved from institutions into the community. Although many more people with disabilities are now living in integrated settings, a significant number still spend their day in segregated settings, like sheltered workshops and day treatment, usually receiving sub-minimum wage or no wages at all. It's now been 25 years since the passage of the ADA, and the employment rate across the country is still incredibly low for people with disabilities. And in Illinois, only 6% of people with developmental disabilities are employed in integrated settings. However, things are changing in Illinois. In 2013, the General Assembly passed unanimously the Employment First Act, and Governor Quinn signed the bill. And then earlier this year, Governor Quinn issued an executive order requiring the state to develop a 5-year plan to implement Employment First in Illinois. So what is Employment First? It's when employment in the general workforce is the first and preferred outcome in the provision of publicly funded services for all working age people with disabilities, regardless of their level of disability. Now, as Zena mentioned, Equip for Equality received funding from the Chicago Community Trust to help us conduct an in-depth research project that reviewed the employment practices in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. And what we were looking to do was identify promising practices for the employment of people with disabilities. Our pro bono partners, Jones Day, McDonald's, and Exelon, were instrumental in this research. We also looked at current promising practices in Illinois, as well as the current barriers that exist to employment in Illinois. And then we developed a number of recommendations and concrete steps to increase the competitive integrated employment of people with disabilities in Illinois. Now at your table, all of you should have a blueprint, and it's divided into several parts. First, there's an executive summary that provides an overview of our findings and recommendations. Then we focus on 6 major issues: current employment services, supported employment funding and rates, use of segregated settings, transition services, data collection, and employer engagement and workforce development. For each of these issues, we identify promising practices from other states and develop recommendations to address current barriers. Next in the blueprint, we do an in-depth look at 3 leading Employment First states: Washington, Kansas, and Connecticut. And then finally, and you don't want to miss this, at the end of the blueprint is a chart that lists all the recommendations and identifies the responsible agency for those recommendations and the action that needs to take place, whether it be legislative, regulatory, or some sort of policy change. So for today's forum, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have first Melissa Pachola and Cheryl Jansen, the lead drafters of the blueprint at Equip for Equality, and Mark Redditori and Michael Jacobson from Jones Day to give an overview of those 6 issues identified in the blueprint and the corresponding recommendations. And then we're going to turn it over to Robin Jones to facilitate a discussion with representatives from the various state agencies who are identified in the Employment First legislation and executive order, and get their perspective on the blueprint's findings and how the recommendations could be implemented. And then we're going to open it up to you, the audience, to give you a chance to do a Q&A with any of our panelists up above.